Donald Trump's war with Iran is coming apart at the seams, and his answer is to rush the 82nd Airborne Division, one of the most elite paratrooper forces in the American military, directly into the Middle East as the ground situation deteriorates hour by hour. This is happening right after Iran unleashed its 79th strike wave of Operation True Promise 4 against Tel Aviv, Diona, and Kabar, deploying Shakan, Emad, and ballistic missiles alongside suicide drones and cluster munitions, raining bomblets across entire neighborhoods in the heart of Tel Aviv. The US and Israel struck energy infrastructure deep inside Iran. Iran turned around and hammered energy targets in Kuwait. Iran's cluster warheads are penetrating Israeli air defenses at a pace that has stunned military analysts 4 weeks into this conflict. The Israeli Air Force is now making a calculated decision to let certain bomblets land because interceptor stockpiles simply cannot match the rate of incoming fire. And while the missiles keep falling and the defense lines keep bending, Trump stepped to the Oval Office podium and told the entire world the war has been won. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what Wave 79 hit inside Israel and explain precisely why Trump is sending paratroopers into a conflict he is telling everyone is already finished. Thank you for watching. Tell me in the comments, do you believe him? The 82nd Airborne Division is stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and it was built for exactly one purpose: to punch into contested territory fast. These are paratroopers conditioned to seize airfields, ports, and critical choke points within 18 hours of getting the call. The immediate response force, the brigade sitting on standby right now, fields roughly 3,000 soldiers capable of touching down anywhere on the planet in less than a day. The specific unit receiving deployment orders is the 1st Brigade Combat Team, currently holding that alert rotation. Weeks before any public announcement, that same headquarters was quietly pulled from a major training exercise at Fort Polk, Louisiana, without explanation. The soldiers inside that building were not caught off guard. The public was, and the 82nd is not going in by itself. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit aboard the USS America is expected in the region by Friday, bringing around 2,200 Marines and sailors with it. The 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, originally pointed toward the Indo-Pacific, had its entire deployment rerouted to the Middle East last week, alongside the Boxer Amphibious Ready Group, which carries F-35B jets capable of vertical takeoff and landing. That is another 2,200 personnel. Stack those numbers on top of the 82nd Airborne, and the total ground force, now converging on the Gulf, cites somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 troops. Senator Lindsey Graham and multiple defense analysts have pointed to Karg Island as the most likely target of this entire buildup. That island sits 16 miles from the Iranian coast and processes the overwhelming bulk of Iran's oil exports. According to published military assessments, the operational plan calls for Marines to establish a beachhead first, followed by the 82nd moving in to expand and hold the perimeter. Open-source flight tracking recorded dozens of transport aircraft lifting off from airfields associated with Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 across the past 72 hours. That is not a defensive configuration. That is pre-assault staging. Please subscribe and like so these updates keep coming. Now here is where things get truly contradictory. On the same day Trump told the press this war was over, Iran executed the 79th wave of Operation True Promise 4, designated Yasser al-Fatihin. The strike package carried Khyber, Shaken, Ahmad, and precision-guided ballistic missiles alongside IRGC aerospace suicide drones, aimed at Diona and positions stretching north of Tel Aviv. Iranian and allied forces simultaneously launched missiles, drones, and rockets against Israel and US-connected targets throughout the broader region. Iranian media framed this as the 79th wave, though independent confirmation of every reported target remains incomplete. In Iraq, a sophisticated drone strike hit Victory Base near Baghdad International Airport, one of the more significant reported attacks of that particular wave. Most observers watching this conflict from the outside have assumed that after 4 straight weeks of American and Israeli bombardment, Iran's offensive capability must be running on fumes. That assumption is wrong. The IRGC has deliberately transitioned away from mass saturation barrages toward fewer but far heavier precision strikes. On day 1 of this war, Iran launched 20 separate volleys at Israel. By day 4, that count dropped to 6, but the missiles themselves became significantly more destructive. IRGC Aerospace Chief General Majid Musavi confirmed that Iran's successful hit rate against American and Israeli positions doubled during the 48-hour stretch covering waves 46 through 48. The warheads currently reaching Israeli airspace now exceed 1,000 kilograms each. Reuters reported that roughly half of every ballistic missile Iran has fired at Israel since late February carried cluster warheads, each designed to scatter approximately 24 submunitions at high altitude across a wide area. Once those bomblets separate from the main body, there is no intercepting them. They are gone. During one documented engagement window, 14 Iranian missiles cleared Israel's entire defense grid without being stopped. 11 of those 14 were cluster munitions. 2 construction workers in Yehud, right outside Tel Aviv, were killed by scattered bomblets at an outdoor worksite. An elderly couple in Ramat Gan were found dead just outside their safe room after a cluster warhead detonated against their apartment building. Israel's Air Force is now trapped inside a brutal arithmetic problem. Because cluster submunitions cannot be intercepted after separation, the only realistic window to stop them is destroying the missile before it breaks apart. Choosing which incoming missiles to intercept and which to let through is not military strength. It is controlled rationing under pressure. Every Iron Dome interceptor carries a price tag of roughly $50,000. Every Arrow 3 interceptor costs north of $2 million. Iran's missiles cost a fraction of either figure to produce. When you are burning 5 to 10 times more money per engagement than your opponent spends to attack you, and that opponent still holds roughly 1,000 ballistic missiles in reserve, the trajectory does not favor you. It points straight toward exhaustion. 79 waves of sustained incoming fire against a defense stockpile that cannot be replenished at the same speed it is being consumed. Sit with that for a moment. Now, here's the piece that makes every other element of this picture worse. We have to talk about the negotiations that are not happening. On March 22nd, Trump posted on Truth Social claiming the United States and Iran had engaged in productive conversations moving toward a complete and total resolution of the conflict. He announced a 5-day pause on strikes targeting Iranian power plants. On March 23rd and 24th, Trump repeated that the United States had maintained productive contact with Iran, cited major areas of agreement, and confirmed the 5-day strike pause on power plants was in effect. Separately, major media outlets reported that a 15-point ceasefire framework had been physically delivered to Tehran through Pakistani intermediaries. Trump himself named Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner as direct participants in these efforts. The New York Times confirmed the White House had transmitted that 15-point peace framework to Tehran via the Pakistani channel. Then Iran responded. Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf posted publicly and without ambiguity that zero negotiations of any kind had taken place between Iran and the United States. He characterized Trump's statements as deliberately manufactured to manipulate oil markets and manufacture the illusion of an exit from a war Washington cannot actually bring under control. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Bakai confirmed there has been no contact of any kind, direct or indirect, with Washington. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi went further, telling CBS News directly that Iran never requested a ceasefire and never sought any form of negotiation. Iran's stated position is that every mediation approach from Turkey, Pakistan, or Egypt should be aimed at Washington, not Tehran, because Iran did not initiate this war. IRGC-affiliated media then issued a pointed warning that special operational plans were being finalized for Tel Aviv and regional partners that would, in their own words, permanently remove any thought of negotiation from the minds of those who started this. That is not diplomatic language. That is a threat with a timeline attached to it. On the exact same day Trump declared victory, the IDF carried out strikes against more than 50 targets inside Iran overnight. Iran answered with a barrage powerful enough to force the Knesset, Israel's parliament, to evacuate an active late-night session mid-debate. Stay with me, because toward the end of this breakdown, I'm going to show you exactly why the person Iran just appointed to replace its assassinated security chief tells you everything about where this war is actually heading. And it contradicts everything coming out of the White House completely. Most outside observers assume that eliminating senior Iranian leaders creates confusion and weakens the regime's decision-making capacity. Every assassination since this war began has produced the exact opposite result. Ali Larijani, one of the most influential security figures inside Iran and a deeply embedded regime insider, was killed in an Israeli strike on March 17th. Intelligence Minister Esmail Khatib was killed the following day. Basij commander Gholam Reza Soleimani was eliminated that same week. On March 24th, Iran announced Mohammad Bakr Zolghadr as Larijani's replacement. Zolghadr is 72, a brigadier general carrying 4 decades of IRGC service, a former deputy commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Guards, former deputy interior minister for security under Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, and former deputy chief of the Armed Forces General Staff, overseeing the Basij, the paramilitary apparatus built specifically to suppress internal opposition. His career has no diplomatic chapter, no back-channel relationships, no history of quiet compromise. That is now the man sitting at the top of Iran's national security structure during an active, escalating war. Larijani came from a political dynasty with real pragmatic instincts, often compared in Iranian terms to the Kennedy family in American politics. His successor is a man whose entire professional identity was forged inside the enforcement and coercion wing of the Islamic Republic. These killings did not break the command structure. They hardened it, and they pushed it deeper into IRGC control. Now, take that leadership consolidation and place it against what is happening to the global economy simultaneously. Before this war started, Brent crude was trading around $70 a barrel. It has since peaked at $119.50 per barrel. When Trump threatened to destroy Iran's power plants, Brent spiked to $114. When he reversed course and floated peace talks, prices collapsed 13% in a single trading session down to roughly $99. By Tuesday, the price was back above $101 because the strikes never actually paused in the first place. Goldman Sachs is projecting these elevated price levels could hold all the way through 2027. The national average for regular gasoline in the United States hit $3.84 per gallon, climbing from $2.98 before the war began, marking the steepest fuel price surge in 2.5 years. The 20-year U.S. Treasury yield shot back to 5% within 24 hours of Trump's peace announcement, dragging mortgage rates towards 7% along with it. The Strait of Hormuz remains completely closed. Iran declared it shut to American, Israeli, and Western allied vessels on March 4th. That passage narrows to just 21 miles at its tightest point and moves roughly 20% of all oil transported by sea across the entire planet. U.S. intelligence confirmed the presence of at least a dozen Iranian limpet mines positioned inside the strait. 150 commercial vessels, including fully loaded oil tankers, remain anchored and waiting in surrounding waters. GPS jamming of undetermined origin is disrupting navigation throughout the strait, generating serious collision risks for tankers carrying millions of barrels of crude through one of the most heavily trafficked maritime corridors on Earth. War risk insurance premiums have exploded to 4 to 6 times their pre-war baseline. For a single very large crude carrier, that cost increase alone adds $250,000 to every single transit. IEA member nations jointly released a record 400 million barrels from strategic reserves on March 11th. It barely moved the needle. NATO allies across Europe declined Trump's request for naval cooperation to reopen the strait on March 16th. Japan, South Korea, and Australia followed with their own refusals. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky disclosed that the U.S. military had approached Kyiv multiple times, asking for expertise on countering Shahed drones, the same Iranian-designed weapons Ukrainian forces have been systematically destroying for years, even while Trump publicly insisted he had no need for outside help. The administration then temporarily eased sanctions on Russian crude in an attempt to pull oil prices down. Saudi Arabia rerouted its export flows through the Red Sea port of Yanbu. The UAE redirected shipments through the Abu Dhabi pipeline toward Fujairah, cutting the Gulf out of the equation entirely. 3 separate global markets, bonds, oil, and maritime insurance, are all pricing in a prolonged conflict with no visible exit. The White House is pricing in a negotiated settlement that the other side is actively and publicly denying exists. Iran's embassy in South Africa published a photograph of a toy steering wheel mounted next to a real one inside a car, framing it as an offer for Trump and the Ayatollah to jointly navigate the strait. A second post displayed fabricated text messages presented as a conversation between Trump and himself, a fictional negotiation with an empty chair on the opposite side. Iran's ambassador to South Africa stated directly and on record that the United States has achieved none of its stated or unstated objectives in this conflict. That mockery carries weight because the underlying data gives it weight. Iran still controls the strait. Iran's missile campaigns have not stopped. Every leadership replacement Iran has made is harder and less open to compromise than the figure who was killed. Arab mediators are now telling anyone who will listen that the two sides are further from resolution today than they were before the opening strikes landed. The central question is no longer whether this war is escalating. That has been answered. The question now is what comes next when a government keeps ordering paratroopers toward a victory nobody can define and keeps claiming progress at a negotiating table where the other side has publicly confirmed there is nobody sitting across from them. Thank you sincerely for watching. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you buy Trump's claim that this war is won? Does deploying the 82nd Airborne read to you as a situation under control or one that is rapidly unraveling? I want to hear from you. Subscribe, hit like, and tap the video on screen for another update. See you soon.